Home for Center TV and 89.3 WBLD Orchard Lake, West Bloomfield, Kego Harbor, Sylvan Lake, 89.3 Lakes FM. It's the Megacast, an hour-long TV and radio streaming show keeping you informed on the day-to-day news. Live from West Bloomfield, we're bringing you the news, updates, and information impacting communities around Michigan. Join our host, Tyler Kieft, as he talks with community members, business leaders, and professional experts about the stories that impact you. You're watching the Megacast on Civic Center TV. Stop by West Bloomfield Town Hall June 14th and get your health in check at the 14th Annual Greater West Bloomfield Health and Wellness Fair. Over 40 businesses, organizations, and vendors take the time to showcase healthy practices, tips, and resources for the community. Young or old, there's something for everyone and everybody. 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. Wednesday, June 14th, the 14th Annual Greater West Bloomfield Health and Wellness Fair. This community update from Civic Center TV and 89.3 Lakes FM.
There are many different kinds of noses. Our noses can sniff out all kinds of things. Good things and bad things. Your nose knows if those sniffles are just a cold, allergies, or COVID-19. So swab it. Test it. It's good to know.
When the temperatures are chilly, being together warms the soul. Keep the winter fun going. Help protect yourself and those around you by keeping your COVID-19 vaccines up to date.
I'm Steve Eiserman of the Detroit Red Wings, and I think every child in Michigan deserves a safe, healthy, and happy childhood. Can we build a state where Children Trust Michigan isn't just a name, but something our kids believe? Please support Children Trust Michigan as the voice for children and families by visiting the website to learn more.
Ronnie started doing prescription pills at the age of 15. And by 19, he died. If your child is struggling with drug use, try not to be too proud to reach out for help. Don't be worried about what the neighbor will think or your family. Just get your child the help they need. Sometimes it's the hard road to take, but the hard road is nothing compared to living with the fact that your child is no longer with you.
There's hope and help at drugfree.org.
You're listening to your radio homes for the Megacast, 89.3 WBLD Orchard Lake and 88.1 WBFH Bloomfield Hills. Today's edition of the Megacast begins now. Welcome to the Megacast, our live daily TV, radio, and streaming show talking about all things Michigan. I'm Tyler Kieft. Today we'll be talking to a number of people about topics of interest and importance to Michiganders just like you. Let's begin with what's making headlines today on our local news page. First, our top article comes from Marina Johnson at the Detroit Free Press. Unseasonably warm winter conditions coupled with a recent up and down weather pattern here in our local area are sparking an early allergy season for Michiganders. Tell me about it. I'm feeling it too. With temperatures this week climbing over 20 degrees above normal and into the 70s. For many, that translates to stuffy noses, itchy and watery eyes, and untethered sneezing fits, which can be both a literal and figurative headache. Typically, allergy season in Michigan does start around this time of the year. As temperatures rise and latent pollen in our trees particularly inundates the atmosphere. According to the Allergy and Asthma Center of Rochester, the allergy season caused by pollen typically runs from late March through June in the early season, with pollen allergies from tree pollen, and late summer into fall, with allergies coming then from grass pollen. With this allergy season already seeming to be coming on with an aggressive kick, some may ask what impact climate change is having on our sniffles and sneezes. Kathleen Sloniger from the Michigan chapter of the Allergy and Asthma Foundation of America said that yes, climate change is contributing to worsening allergies because it's sparking the seasonal conditions earlier than normal, meaning more people are becoming susceptible to allergic reactions. Said Sloniger to the Detroit Free Press, quote, "More people will begin to show allergy symptoms when they never had them in the past. It's the immune system, you can only take so much. Anecdotally, more people are talking about how their allergies are worse. As for what causes," and closed quote. As for what causes these allergies, it's often because the body confuses pollen for a dangerous intruder, and so it goes into a full reaction trying to weed out that pollen like it would any other contagion that may be in your body at any given time. It fights it off, and all those conditions we talked about, the watery eyes, the itchy eyes, the sniffles and sneezes. Those are your body's reaction to this particular stimuli as it tries to weed it out of your system. So it's not so much that you are allergic to the pollen, it's more that your immune system is a fighter, and maybe it's just a little bit confused about what it has gotten into your body in these cases. But better be safe than sorry, am I right? So I can't blame your immune system for taking its precautions. So what can you do in these sorts of cases, especially now as we're seeing allergy season, as was reported, starting a little bit earlier and being a little bit more aggressive to even more people than normally would be encountering these allergies. Over-the-counter medications can help, as well as some allergy treatments in more severe cases of these outcomes, but avoiding outdoor tasks on windier and drier days, that's one thing you can do. Changing clothes after being outside for a prolonged period, and drying items indoors instead of outside. So if you're someone that likes to hang up your clothes on a clothesline and still get that natural wind dry of it, it might be a better idea, especially during those allergy times of the year, especially our early season right now, March through about June, to take them inside and dry them in a dryer, or hang them over a sink, or some other method that you can dry your clothes other than having them hanging outside. They're among the different steps that you can take to avoid some of these allergies. So look, it's been bad over recent years. Certainly I've felt these allergies too. I get them when the seasons change, particularly when those weather patterns are changing more aggressively from cold to warm and vice versa. Definitely this week I've been feeling a little bit of those sniffles and the itchiness in the nose and in the eyes coming on, but it's not been as bad as it has been in past years. But that's just me. For everybody, it's going to affect them differently depending on, as was marked in this article, how your immune system reacts to that stimuli, to that pollen getting into your body. For some people, it's going to react quite aggressively. You're going to have significant symptoms of those itchy eyes, the scratchy nose, the sneezing, and all of that. And for others, it may be minor, or some may not be feeling these allergies at all just yet, as we are relatively early in Michigan's allergy season. Really interesting article from the Detroit Free Press. Highly encourage you to read it in full, as well as those supporting materials from their team, from Marina Johnson. She did a great job with this. It's linked on our website, civiccentertv.com, on our local news page. Additionally, making headlines today from Kara Berg at the Detroit News. Here in Oakland County, a judge has denied James and Jennifer Crumbley's requests to attend their teenage son's hearing as he faces a guilty plea to charges including terrorism for perpetrating the November 2021 mass shooting at Oxford High School. Circuit Court Judge Cheryl Matthews denied the request earlier this week without providing a reason for doing so. This all came after a late March request from the Crumbleys to attend their son's trial, which received a strong reaction from the prosecutor's office. Attorneys for the Crumbleys said the May 1st Miller hearing for their son was of the utmost importance for them to be attending, as it will be what determines whether or not the circumstances are fit to sentence their son, currently 16 years old, although he was 15 at the time of the shooting, to life in prison without parole. This hearing is a requirement in this case because of the teen's minority age status. So far, the Crumbleys have not been able to be in contact with their son directly, though they're through theirs and his trials, although they have had some updates from attorneys and families on their son's conditions and feelings, which they have referred to as being, quote, sufficient, and close quote. In reaction to the request for them to attend their son's trial, prosecutors balked, with Assistant Prosecutor Mark Kieft writing that that their concern for their son is, quote, a stark contrast to their actions and inactions immediately after the shooting, end closed quote. The Crumbleys are currently facing 4 counts each of manslaughter for their alleged role in their son's murder of 4 of his classmates, those being Justin Schilling and Madison Baldwin, both 17 at the time, Tate Meir, who was 16, and Hannah St. Juliana, who was 14 years old in November of 2021. Also making headlines today from Bridge, Michigan's Robin Erb, some concerning metrics in our healthcare community as new research is saying 40% of Michigan nurses are planning to walk away from their current jobs in the next year. Their main concerns and rationale for these exits were surrounding inadequate staffing and safety concerns in the workplace. This is all based off of an email survey that questioned over 9,000 licensed and registered nurses, as well as 1,224 RNs who have already left their jobs in the past 2 years. Among the negative conditions reported in the survey were physical, emotional, and or sexual abuse, bullying, or simply just exhaustion. While 40% said they planned to leave per the survey, 28% said their plans were not to leave, but rather to reduce their hours of work within the next 12 months. Definitely concerning is the metric from this survey where 84% of those that filled out this email questionnaire said they were emotionally exhausted from their work and that these conditions were among the reasons why they were more likely or were very much likely going to reduce their hours or leave their jobs over the next year. That's definitely a concerning message from the healthcare community. We have seen it, and we've heard accounts of it over the last several years during the COVID-19 pandemic and in the immediate aftermath of the bulk of that pandemic, although it's still COVID-19 still affecting our communities in some ways and others, including in our healthcare systems, how exhausted these individuals were. They were working around the clock to keep our communities safe, to treat people that were hospitalized, especially in those earlier months before there were vaccines that were not preventing necessarily cases of COVID-19, but reducing their severity and keeping people in some cases out of the hospital or out of the hospital with prolonged symptoms or severe symptoms. But these nurses, these healthcare providers, these professionals, they've been through a lot in the past several years. And so that emotional exhaustion certainly is something that we can sympathize with them about, as we've seen what they've gone through. We've heard so many accounts of what these healthcare workers have gone through in the last several years, especially during the thick of the COVID-19 pandemic. Those other situations, those work conditions, the negative attitudes that have been thrown their way or behaviors that have been thrown their way, those that are claiming abuse in the workplace in these cases, those are heavy concerns that hopefully the healthcare community can take this survey information and do some inward looking and see what they can do to better those conditions for their healthcare workers, especially if this survey does in fact reflect the bulk of the thought in our healthcare communities, particularly in nursing in the state of Michigan, where 40% of those that were surveyed, that's 2 in 5 is what they had said in this, so that's roughly 40%. Depending on the metrics exactly from this survey, that were saying they were planning on leaving their jobs in the next year, or a certain percentage too that were saying they were 28% in this case that had reported they may not leave their job entirely, but will reduce their hours. That means less people working. That means less people on the job at any given time, which means those that are remaining, that exhaustion may only inflate in the near future and lead to more of this. So certainly it's something that needs to be considered in our healthcare communities. What can they do going forward? What can these hospitals, these other healthcare systems do in the future to make that workplace better conditions for these nurses who have been through more than enough for an entire career in the past few years and are certainly still feeling the effects of their everyday work on their bodies, on their emotions, and on their passion for their career as well. Really interesting article from Robin Erb and the team at Bridge, Michigan here. Linked on our website. Highly encourage you to read through it. It really does paint a good picture and has a link to the study as well, so you can read even more information about those just over 9,000 state registered nurse and licensed nurses, as well as that over 1,000 nurses who have already left their positions or reduced their time, and kind of get a point of view on where they're at in the healthcare system and in the healthcare community right now. It's a big issue. It's an important issue, especially given what we've been through as a greater community over the last several years with the COVID-19 pandemic. Finally, making headlines today on CivicCenterTV.com's local news page from MLive's Jordan Hermani. A big question in the wake of the MSU mass shooting was learning the criminal history and plea history of the 43-year-old shooter, was whether or not it was just to make the plea deals down from felonies to misdemeanors legal. That was something that was a very heavy debate in the wake of that, especially as we learned the criminal history and the plea history of the 43-year-old shooter. The question became whether or not it was just to make plea deals going down from felonies to misdemeanors. House Bill 4339, sponsored by Michigan House Minority Leader Matt Hall, a Republican from Richland Township, would now ban the practice of prosecutors allowing alleged criminals to plea their charges down from felonies to misdemeanors. Part of the rationale behind this proposal is a bit of Monday morning quarterbacking of the MSU shooting case, where a 43-year-old man legally obtained his weapons used in the murder of 3 students and the injuries of 5 others. If he had been convicted of a felony, which he was initially charged with, rather than a misdemeanor, which he pled down to, he would have been barred from purchasing a gun or purchasing those weapons used altogether. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that he wouldn't have still perpetrated this crime based on what we know about his mental health condition and how he felt isolated to some extent socially. It's very likely he still would have tried to find some way to make that incident happen the way that it did. Maybe it wouldn't have been as easy. Perhaps it wouldn't have been as easy as it was for him to obtain those weapons if he had a felony on his record and was barred from purchasing a gun legally, but that doesn't necessarily mean it would have prevented all that. That being said, this is still something that has been up for debate. Certainly some in Lansing have brought this up as a possibility. Should we bar prosecutors from being able to take these measures, using their discretion and negotiating with defense attorneys and so on and so forth to reduce these sentences from felonies to misdemeanors? The bill's co-sponsor, Representative David Martin, a Republican from Davison, told MLive about the bill, quote, "We understand prosecutorial discretion, but when the charge is a felony, that would require them to lose their right to own a firearm, and any plea bargain should not be lower than them having that screen. So they should go in front of a judge, a jury, and find out if they are still able to carry that firearm, rather than a prosecutor, one person, saying that they're going to waive that condition," and closed quote. In the wake of the MSU shooting, especially with backlash surrounding the news of the shooter's previous plea deal from a felony to a misdemeanor charge, which he was ultimately convicted, many prosecutors argued that the discretion used in that case was proper, given that he had a lack of a previous criminal history, with only really having some speeding tickets on the books before he had been arrested on that particular crime. This bill has been referred to the state House's Judiciary Committee and is currently awaiting a hearing and has not received any votes so far and has not been put into law at this time. All these headlines are making news today on our local news page on CivicCenterTV.com, where you can also find links to public health information from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, as well as the Oakland County Health Division. We have a great show ahead on today's edition of the Megacast. Coming up next, it's our weekly markets and economy segment with Dr. Michael Greiner from Oakland University. Plenty going around Michigan and across the U.S., so you'll want to stay tuned and learn more after this break. Stay tuned. This is the Megacast.
Hello, nose. My nose knows is when somebody uses the bathroom. Mom, Pauline didn't flush. Ooh, I smell cookies.
I smell an A+. How could my nose be running when it stays on my face?
Our noses know if those sniffles are just a cold, allergies, or COVID-19. So swab it. Test it. It's good to know.
Let's relish these moments, made possible by the COVID-19 vaccine. Keep the festivals going by keeping yourself protected and your COVID-19 vaccines up to date.
There are many different kinds of noses. Our noses can sniff out all kinds of things. Good things and bad things. Your nose knows if those sniffles are just a cold, allergies, or COVID-19. So swab it. Test it. It's good to know.
Welcome back to the Megacast, our live daily TV, radio, and streaming show talking about all things Michigan. I'm Tyler Kieft. You can always learn more about our partnering stations across the Great Lakes State and find all of our full shows and each individual interview segment that's going over a number of different issues locally and statewide by visiting civiccentertv.com/Megacast. We encourage you to do that, whether you're tuning in for our full live shows from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. on each and every one of our weekdays, or you're tuning in on your own time throughout your day or on the weekends to keep up to date in our local communities. Always are able to do that on civiccentertv.com/Megacast. Joining us now from Oakland University is Assistant Professor of Management, Dr. Michael Greiner, who is with the university's School of Business Administration. Michael, thank you as always for joining us.
It's great to be here. Happy Friday.
Yeah, happy Friday to you as well. As we continue to look at the state of our economy, a lot of this circles back to the job market. And here in Michigan, it's an interesting scenario in comparison to many of the other 50 states, in the 49 other states in the union. So in terms of the jobs outlook, where does Michigan stand in comparison to many of these other states? We know that in some cases, Michigan's in a better position, but it's not necessarily the best place in the union for jobs.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. We actually just this morning got some new jobs data for March, and it appears that still the jobs market is very strong, although it's slowed slightly. And the good news is some people seem to be coming off the sidelines. I've seen some articles recently in, for example, Bridge, Michigan, actually, where they were talking about the fact that many retirees are starting to come back to work because they're being drawn to it by increasing wages. Well, interestingly enough, in Michigan in particular, our jobs market relative to the rest of the country is not all that strong, actually. In fact, out of 56 major metropolitan areas, we're ranked 51st. So that's not so great. Interestingly enough, just above New York City, which was kind of a surprise to me. But of course, New York City has been dealing with all kinds of issues with finance slowing down and with, of course, people not moving back into the city and not wanting to come back into the office buildings that they vacated as a result of COVID. So that being said, our unemployment rate is probably higher than it is in certain other parts of the country. We've also got less labor force participation in certain parts of the country. And, it makes some sense, actually. We just saw that GM announced that they have asked for certain voluntary personnel reductions. They said that they wanted to forcibly, essentially, lay off about 500 white-collar workers. Well, now it turns out that they went to their white-collar workforce and asked for volunteers, essentially, offering them a buyout to get them to voluntarily leave the workforce. As it turns out, actually, my son's father-in-law is one of those white-collar workers who decided to accept a buyout. We just heard the other day. And as a result, GM actually just announced that they're not going to need to engage in involuntary layoffs because of the fact that so many people have taken the buyout package. So that's good news there. But it shows that there's been kind of this slowdown in the workforce here in Michigan that you haven't seen in some other parts of the country. We saw a few months ago that Ford, for example, laid off as many as 3,000 people. And there's been talk about the fact that they might lay off some more. And it has to do with a couple of factors. I mean, number one, we had this weird situation where there was high demand for vehicles, and then suddenly we had COVID come. Suddenly people weren't buying vehicles, and suddenly they were buying them again. And at the same time, they were having trouble getting semiconductors. So they had this real challenge of kind of trying to balance supply with demand. And actually, one of the things that initially kicked off the whole spate of inflation that we're dealing with right now had a lot to do with the fact that people were paying a lot of money for used cars because they couldn't get new cars because they weren't available. Well, now it appears that the automakers have pretty much been able to rebuild their inventory. And at the same time, though, they're also moving over toward more electric vehicles. As it turns out, electric vehicles have fewer moving parts than internal combustion engines. And as a result of that, there's an expectation that there will be fewer employees needed by the automakers as they move into this electric vehicle era. We're seeing some competition among states to try to attract the employees that there will be. In fact, I saw that Ohio in particular is being very aggressive about it, and you can bet that Michigan's really trying to hold on to those jobs as well. But one thing that is clear is it seems like the overall workforce of the auto industry is shrinking a little bit. And Michigan, of course, as you know, we rely on that auto industry. So I think it's not all that surprising that the overall job growth here hasn't been as great as you've seen in some other parts of the country. The other thing, too, is that one of the big industries that has seen a lot of job growth is tourism. Because of the fact, again, so many people weren't traveling during COVID, and then it came roaring back after as things started to open up. And as a result of that, that's been one of the big areas of growth. Well, I mean, Michigan isn't exactly, a tourist mecca, although we have some great tourist destinations, don't get me wrong. I don't think anybody would mistake us for Florida. So that being said, the areas where you're seeing the stronger job growth isn't really one of our great strengths of our economy. And some of the areas seeing weaker job growth is actually where our economy is based. So you're seeing slower job growth here. One thing that is encouraging, though, is that with wage growth, interestingly enough, Michigan is relatively strong. We're about in the middle of the pack. And I think, again, that has to do with the fact that Michigan, relative to some other parts of the country, we have relatively strong unions. They've been able to push the employers to increase wages and keep the pace of the wage increases up as much as can be with the pace of inflation, which has been a real positive for the people who are working. But one thing's for sure is we don't have the kind of active job force here in Michigan that I think you can see in some other parts of the country.
And we've talked about that before. The metrics we have on job numbers may not be entirely accurate because there's been so much time between when many of these people had left the workforce versus now. And the unemployment metrics in particular, they only go off of people that have been out of work for a certain period of time. But you also mentioned people are starting to come off of the sidelines and get back into the labor force. So in Michigan, how is that affecting our numbers too? Are we seeing more people come off the sidelines and seek work? And perhaps is that also impacting our unemployment numbers?
Yeah, we definitely are. And that's kind of one of the ironies here, which you point out exactly right, which is that we have kind of these weird ways of calculating unemployed. You'd think that unemployed simply means people not working. Well, in fact, it actually means percentage of people who are not working who are part of the overall workforce. So in other words, who are either looking for work or who are working. So you have this large group of people who may simply not be part of the workforce for various reasons. Now, some of them could be voluntary, things like, say, they are retired or they are stay-at-home parents, that type of thing. The other issue, though, is that you'll get what are called discouraged workers, where they say, hey, I've been looking for work and I've been unable to find work, so I've kind of given up. And that certainly is a factor of that number. And I think what we're starting to see, though, is that because of the fact that wages are going up, you're seeing, especially here in Michigan, you're seeing more and more of these retired workers in particular who'd said, hey, I'm kind of tired of working. I've enjoyed this time off with COVID. I don't necessarily want to go back to work. And so they've been staying on the sidelines. And that's actually been lowering our unemployment rate. Well, as they've come back to the workforce, ironically, our unemployment rate actually goes up, even though we're actually increasing the number of people working, simply because you've got more people coming off the sidelines than you've got increases in jobs. So it's kind of one of those weird dynamics. But certainly we've seen that there's been an increase of people moving from the status of being retired back into the workforce. And that's certainly something that means that we have fewer jobs that are available at this point. And that's certainly reflected in the unemployment figures that we're seeing relative to other parts of the country.
Michael Greiner is an assistant professor of management at Oakland University's School of Business Administration, joining us as he does every week for our weekly Markets and Economy segment here on the Megacast. You can always find us on demand on civiccentertv.com/Megacast to keep up to date on the latest information affecting you here in Michigan and, of course, around the world and the U.S., which also affects us right here in the Great Lakes state. Michael, you mentioned earlier on that despite the current job numbers, wage numbers in Michigan are looking pretty positive. That wouldn't be what would be said by those working in graduate positions at our universities, particularly at the University of Michigan. But we also know there have been protests beginning among graduate workers at Grand Valley State as well, and other universities across the union. So what is going on in terms of that in higher education, particularly those graduate workers?
Yeah, well, it's a tough situation. As a former graduate worker myself, I can tell you that they are not paid particularly well and never have been. But that being said, they're kind of getting squeezed from a couple of factors. Of course, everyone's dealing with inflation, and that's always a factor. But we're also dealing with the fact that many of these workers are unionized, and as a result of that, they're covered by long-term union contracts. So these long-term union contracts don't necessarily take into consideration the fact that, we've been having this high rate of inflation lately. And so as a result, I actually saw recently a study that showed that among educators, generally speaking, and certainly among grad assistants in particular, that they've actually on a real basis been losing ground with their wages. So unlike in certain other professions where you see a lot more, vitality in the wage market, where there's competition among wages to bring people on, you don't see that so much in the education arena. And that's made especially worse given the fact that we're dealing with a bit of a demographic crisis nationally right now. You see, what happened is after the baby boomers had kind of finished their process of education and kind of came off the sidelines, there was an expectation that there'd be less need for higher education, that fewer people would be graduating from high school and therefore going on to higher education. Well, that was kind of delayed because of the fact that suddenly it became clear that the new economy that we were having required much higher education, and that the value of a college education is really something that really can't be equaled virtually in any other way throughout the workforce. So as a result of that, you saw this increase in the percentage of people who were graduating from high school going on to college. And that's been kind of a wave then that has sustained higher education for the past couple decades. Well, now that appears to be kind of coming to an end, where the declining size of the young people in America is starting to hit education, where there are fewer and fewer people graduating from high school, and that's certainly true in Michigan. And as a result of that, fewer and fewer people potentially going on to college. Well, that doesn't, ironically, impact universities like, say, the University of Michigan or Michigan State that recruit nationally. It's also had a relatively small impact, for example, on some commuter schools, schools like, say, Oakland University, which, of course, I'm grateful for, but certainly, interestingly, U of M Flint, which actually, among the schools other than U of M and Michigan State in particular, is one of the better schools in terms of retaining the number of students that it's got. The biggest schools that have been impacted, frankly, are kind of the mid-tier schools that tend to be schools that people go away to. As I understand it, for example, Central Michigan University had to close an entire dorm just because they don't have the numbers going to the school that they did in the past. So we're seeing this across the board in the education process. So there's kind of this squeeze going on, and at the same time, we're also seeing new competitors coming to the table, where at one point you had higher education was, frankly, kind of a monopoly. Let's face it, where you had the universities who were in a position that they could kind of state the price and people were willing to pay for it. Well, now you're seeing more private universities coming to the table, more alternative universities. People have access to other universities online, for example, where it used to be that you'd have to go to a university that was located near you. So as a result of that, there's this downward pressure then on the costs that the universities are able to charge. So you see this tension then where universities are now dealing with some difficult finances. And that has certainly impacted the wages then that they're paying all of the instructors and certainly the graduate students in particular. And large part of it has to do, frankly, with the fact that graduate instructors have relatively little power in the workforce. Let's face it, they are students. They are basically there to learn. And as a result of that, they're not viewed as being as critical to the workforce as, say, the college professors themselves. Well, as it turns out, though, over the past, say, 30 years or so, there's been this move in the universities more and more to rely on part-time instructors and graduate assistants to teach more and more classes. So as a result of that, when you see this strike happening, it actually has had a huge impact on U of M, and it's shut down a lot of the classes that they've had ongoing, to the point where U of M actually had to go to court, and they asked the court to put a stop to the strike, and that effort actually was unsuccessful in court. So be interesting to see what happens there.
Yeah, it's a lot of information on that. We have a couple articles that are linked to, I believe, one from MLive and one from another publication locally on our local news page on civiccentertv.com. If you scroll to about the lower third of the page, you'll get a couple of those articles from the beginning of the week as it was reaching that 1 week point in the protests and in the strike by graduate students at the University of Michigan, and then even after the ruling by the courts to ultimately not put in that preliminary injunction on the strike, with the University of Michigan claiming that it was an illegal strike per their deal with that particular union. Plenty of more to develop on that story, so stick to our local news page for all of that. Michael Greiner joins us for our weekly market and economy segment here on the Megacast. He's with Oakland University, where he serves as an assistant professor of management in their School of Business Administration. Also making a big impact across our state and really across the U.S. is the sunset of many of these COVID-19 provisions that were helping both on the healthcare side and on the economic side. For people here in Michigan, we're starting to see an impact of the end of some of those pandemic protections and expenses that were going toward these families to help them pay for food and other items that are necessities in their homes because of lost wages due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Now that those benefits are going away, we're seeing that already begin to have a major impact on these families, particularly those that were receiving SNAP benefits here in Michigan. Just how big of an impact is this having?
Yeah, it's a huge impact. And this is something that I think we in Michigan really need to be concerned about, because basically what you saw happen is, as a result of COVID, there were these emergency measures that were put into effect. One of them was to dramatically increase the amount of food assistance that people got. That's known as SNAP. It stands for Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. It's what people used to refer to as food stamps. And what you've seen is a decline from people getting as much as a couple $100s a month in food assistance down to as little as $24 a month. So it's been a huge impact on the amount of money that people are receiving. At the same time, another pandemic program that's expiring has to do with Medicaid. And what that is that during COVID, there was this rule put in place that states couldn't kick people off of Medicaid. So you have to remember, the way Medicaid works is it's largely funded by the federal government, but it's actually administered by each individual state, who then pays a certain percentage of how it operates. And so in each state, what they do is that they will determine, who's eligible and who's not eligible. And then they'll go through different administrative processes to enforce that. Well, what the federal government said is, because of this COVID crisis, you can't engage in these administrative processes and you can't kick anybody off of Medicaid. Well, that might sound like a good thing because, people who don't deserve it shouldn't be getting the assistance. But the fact is that so much of this bureaucracy ends up being this burden that a lot of people have trouble maintaining. Let me give you an example. Say somebody who is unemployed has to move. They don't update their address regularly with Medicaid. Medicaid might send them certain letters saying, hey, you need to update your income information with us. If they don't get that letter because of the fact that they're moving, because they're dealing with this dislocation with their job situation, then they might be kicked off Medicaid even though they're still eligible for it. And in fact, there's an estimate that as many as 400,000 Michiganders might lose their Medicaid coverage as a result of this change, and that as much as half of them might be eligible for Medicaid, but yet lose it anyway. So if there's any guidance, I think that we should be giving to everybody who is involved in Medicaid is make sure your address is up to date and your and you stay in touch with the Medicaid offices and respond to any letters that are out there. I think that's a critical message we need to get out to everybody. From a public policy standpoint, There's talk about potentially making it where you don't just kick someone off Medicaid, but you shift them into one of the Obamacare plans that are out there, and give them a kind of a couple of months to transition. That's an approach that's being taken in Rhode Island and California, and it's been proposed here in Michigan. It hasn't been resolved yet, but the goal is to try to soften this a little bit, because you could imagine the difficulty that many of these people have if they're out of work, they've been covered by Medicaid, they suddenly find themselves sick, and surprise, surprise, all of a sudden you find you're not covered with your health insurance anymore. That could be a real crisis. So I think that we're going to see some real dislocation among people between this reduction in SNAP benefits at the same time as we're dealing with inflation, and then people getting kicked off Medicaid, many of whom should be on it anyway. And again, this all comes down to the fact that these emergency measures that were put in place as a result of COVID are coming to an end.
And lastly, Michael, just to go off of that, for more information, there was a really good article in MLive recently about some of these benefits going away, where people were receiving, because of these benefits during the pandemic, several $100s a month for food to support themselves and their families, and now could be cut down in one case as low as $23 for an entire month. And just think about it in the context of our current times and your most recent trip to the grocery store. $23 isn't going to cut it for a full month. So this is a really important story, and glad that we discussed it today. Lastly, partly what's affecting some of the prices of goods going up and down all over the place is the price of gasoline, and really connected to that is the price of oil. We've seen some up and downs recently, but mostly ups of late. What is causing that, Michael? It can't just be some random trash fire in an office in Henderson, Nevada.
I know you got that right. It is, unfortunately, we're talking about OPEC again. And many of us who were around back in the early 70s remember the crisis that OPEC caused back then, and how they've been kind of manipulating oil prices across the world. Well, they're back. And this time, it's not just OPEC being kind of the Middle Eastern countries that people are thinking about, but they call it OPEC Plus, which includes such countries as Nigeria and, yes, Russia, that we've heard so much about with their invasion in Ukraine. Well, ironically, Russia has been very frustrated by the fact that they haven't been earning the kind of money that they've wanted to from their oil exports to help finance their war in Ukraine. And as a result of that, they've been reducing their production for a number of months now, with the aim of increasing prices so they're able to generate more revenues. Well, that has not been particularly successful. So now the concern is that it appears that Saudi Arabia and some of the other allies who are in OPEC have stepped up to the table to help Russia in that regard and to drive oil prices a little bit up more. It appears that the goal that they want to achieve is to get oil prices up above $80 a barrel. Which is, lately it's been in the low 70s dollar per barrel area. So you can imagine that's going to have an impact on the pump. It could push gas prices up to, close to $4 a gallon if we're not careful. So the challenge right now is going to be that OPEC, they basically want to reduce production, and thereby, kind of that old supply-demand curve we're always talking about. You have less supply that's going to drive up prices, and that's exactly what they're trying to accomplish here. I can tell you, though, that this whole situation sticks a little bit in the craw of many of us, myself included, when you think some of the countries that are involved in this. I mean, of course, you're talking about Saudi Arabia, you're talking about Kuwait, and you're talking about Iraq, all countries that the United States made huge investments in to protect over the past couple decades. And yet here they are raising oil prices on us again. So that is, I must say, kind of annoying. But unfortunately, it's the way things go. And until the United States is really able to reduce our dependency on foreign oil, which we have done a great job on, but still, it's what drives the market out there. Then until that happens, then we're going to continue to see OPEC continuing to have this control over our own destiny.
Well, Michael, we appreciate you joining us as always to talk about these stories that are affecting us directly here in Michigan and indirectly also affecting us here in Michigan from a few other steps, including the current crisis with what's going on in terms of oil prices jumping all over the place through OPEC and OPEC Plus as well. Thank you so much for being with us.
Great to be here. Have a great weekend.
You as well. We will see you next week. Michael Greiner from Oakland University with us every single Friday for a market and economy segment right here on the Megacast. You can always stay up to date with our segments by visiting us on our website at civiccentertv.com/Megacast. We'll take a quick break. On the other side, one of over 340 charities and nonprofits and counting right here in the Metro Detroit area will join us to talk about their services and their programs up next. Stay with us. This is the Megacast.
Can I ask you a question? Why do you want to get the COVID-19 vaccine?
I don't like getting sick.
The virus will die.
It will be easy to not catch it. Keep my family safe and keep playing soccer. Because I love being vaccinated.
What's your hope for everyone?
I hope everybody gets the vaccine.
To keep safe and strong.
Be like happy, having fun everywhere. Everyone stay safe and hope you get the vaccine.
I'm Steve Eiserman of the Detroit Red Wings, and I think every child in Michigan deserves a safe, healthy, and happy childhood. Can we build a state where children trust Michigan isn't just a name, but something our kids believe? Please support Children Trust Michigan as the voice for children and families by visiting the website to learn more.
Welcome back to the Megacast, our live daily TV, radio, and streaming show talking about all things Michigan. I'm Tyler Kieft. You can always tune in to us live and on demand by visiting our website at civiccentertv.com/Megacast, where you'll also find more information on all of our partnering stations, including in your hometown right here in Oakland County. civiccentertv.com/Megacast is the place to go for that. Well, there are plenty of great charities and nonprofits making a huge impact in Detroit and the metropolitan area each and every day. And one of them joining us now is Southwest Solutions, where Sean DeFore serves as their president and CEO. Sean, thanks for being with us today.
Hi, Tyler. It's great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, glad to have you on to talk about your organization, Southwest Solutions. Tell us about your organization, its mission, and some of the services and programs it provides in Detroit.
Absolutely. So we're one of Detroit's largest and most innovative nonprofit human service organizations. We're over 52 years old, and we serve approximately 13,500 people every year. We do that through three different lines of services that we have. Our largest is our Southwest Counseling Solutions, which has 4 centers of excellence. The largest is our behavioral health services for children, youth, families, and adults. We also serve people experiencing homelessness, as well as veterans and their families to help support them. Our second major division provides affordable housing and real estate development all over the city of Detroit, where we help people find safe, quality, affordable housing. And then our final is our Southwest Economic Solutions, which helps people find employment, learn skills, increase their education, and learn financial literacy to be economically self-sufficient.
And so it really comes down to those 3 key pillars of solutions that you're providing to people in Detroit: human development, economic development, and community development. Why focus on those 3 areas all together when some organizations may hyper-focus on one or the other?
Yeah, it's a great question. So our mission is to improve the quality of life, success, and self-sufficiency for individuals and families in Detroit. And we know that the only way to do that in a long-lasting and significant way is to take a holistic approach to providing care and services to the folks that we support in Detroit. So dealing with housing, employment, and physical and behavioral health, we know are the keys to helping people become self-sufficient and live a high quality of life. So one of the things that makes us unique is that we combined those services holistically around the people that we support in Detroit.
And so much of these different issues are connected to one another. Housing can affect your behavioral health as well, and that can affect how you engage in the community, how you engage economically, your socioeconomic status, and all that. So taking that holistic approach, you've seen it yourself and the way it impacts these individuals and these communities. Just how far of a reach does it have when you're taking that holistic approach, as you said, in those three areas?
Yeah, that's absolutely right, Tyler. And what we've learned is that, people are not one-dimensional, and neither are their problems. So they may come to us because they're looking for an affordable apartment in which to live. But when we dig a little bit deeper, we find that they may need some help upskilling so that they can get a job that provides them a living wage to be more stable and sufficient. Part of why they might not be able to achieve that is because of experiences they've had in their background that contribute to mental health challenges that they need support with. So for us, we find that we can't just provide one thing to folks. They may come to us for one thing, but it's really our job to figure out all of the things that they need and find a way to support them in getting those needs met.
You can learn more information about Southwest Solutions by visiting their website at swsol.org or by visiting sharedetroit.org, going to their Find a Nonprofit section and searching for Southwest Solutions, including their contact information, ways you can get involved, some of their programs and events, and more. Sharedetroit.org, the place to go for that, or go directly to their website at swsol.org or give them a call in their administration building, 313-481-3102. We're joined by their president and CEO, Sean DeFore, on today's edition of the Megacast. And you're serving a wide range of people in a wide range of areas. Your website lists over 13,500 people you are serving on a yearly basis. That's a large amount of people. That's a significant impact you're having in the Detroit community. So how are people coming to your organization for these services? Is it word of mouth? Is it referrals? Are you finding them?
All of those ways. And you listed our phone number. Thank you for sharing that. Our website, swsol.org. Those are the most common ways that people find us, as well as referrals from the community or even word of mouth. Our heart and home is in Southwest Detroit, so a lot of folks in the community know us. When they have family members or individually they have a need, they know to come to us because we're a trusted community resource. But we serve the entire Detroit community, so all over the city, people generally know the name Southwest Solutions, and when they need help, they give us a call, they come find us, or even stop in at one of our many locations in Southwest Detroit.
Just how much of a difference maker are these services? So many people are being served by your organization every year, are being helped in these number of areas, but how far does it actually go, Sean?
Yeah, every one of those 13,500 people that you mentioned that we serve every year, their lives are changed because of the services that they receive from us. Whether it's they're able to avoid being unhoused and becoming homeless because of the affordable apartment that we developed and manage to help them stay stable, or the employment training that we've given them that helps them find a better, more stable job to support themselves and their families, or even the behavioral health support that we may give them that prevents them from that next overdose that may have taken their lives, or an episode of depression or anxiety that would have resulted in their family breaking apart or losing a job. Every one of those 13,500 people, their life is forever changed because of their contact with Southwest Solutions. So I'd say that's about as far and as deep as it goes. And, our ability to help people and provide services is directly proportional to the support that we get from the community. So the more folks out there listening support us, either through donations or volunteering, or just sharing our story, the more people we're able to serve in Detroit.
You can find more information and ways to get in contact with Southwest Solutions by visiting their website at swsol.org. And again, their phone number, 313-481-3102, 313-481-3102. You can also find all this information on Share Detroit's website at sharedetroit.org, where you can learn more about Southwest Solutions and 342 and counting other charities and nonprofits all across the Detroit metropolitan area. Sean, in terms of cost for these services, is there any cost associated with any of these different services and programs provided by Southwest Solutions?
No, they're not. All of our services are provided free of charge, and most of our services are supported through government contracts and grants. I'll share some information later on in the show about our major fundraiser that helps us cover some of those costs so the services can remain free. But a lot of those grants and contracts require matches, which we get through fundraised dollars. But all that to say that if somebody needs help from us, it's delivered at zero cost.
And let's go into that fundraiser that's coming up. You have a fundraiser coming up in the fall in September at the Henry Ford Museum. Tell us about that event and how something like that can go a really long way to supporting people here in Metro Detroit.
Yeah, so we do one major fundraiser a year. As you mentioned, it's our celebration of impact. So we celebrate those 13,500 plus lives every year that we change. We bring together people from all over Detroit and the Metro Detroit area, have a great time. We do a gala with a live auction as part of it as well. This year we're holding it on September 29th at the Henry Ford Museum. It starts at 6 o'clock, and if anybody's interested in attending or sponsoring the event, if you go to that swsol.org website, you'll find a link for our celebration of impact. But the money that's raised there is used to match many of the grants that we receive to serve people who are experiencing homelessness or the heroes that have served our country that need our support to remain housed and stable, or people that are struggling with behavioral health needs. But every dollar that's raised goes to supporting the people that we serve.
swsol.org. Just click on their Celebration of Impact button at the top of their page. It's highlighted in orange at the top right of their page, and you can learn more information and register for this event Friday, September 29th at 6 p.m. in Dearborn at the Henry Ford Museum. More information, again, swsol.org. Sean, just another 90 seconds or so left on today's program. I want to give you some time to talk about volunteer opportunities too. If people have areas of expertise or just time to give to help other people in our local communities, how can they get involved?
Yeah, absolutely. Same. If you go to swsol.org/volunteer, you'll find a range of volunteer opportunities for us. What we do, we don't do alone. We do with the community and with your support. So whether it's through donations or volunteering, you can volunteer to come to our neighborhood beautification day, where we clean up vacant lots and lay mulch at local schools and beautify our neighborhood. That's going to be on June 3rd. There's information on our website. You can volunteer to mentor one of the many youth that we serve whose life could be changed because of your mentoring and support and a relationship with a trusted adult. You can volunteer to do mock interviews to help someone that is at our adult learning lab improving their English skills or working on their resume, and they want to prepare for that next interview for the job that they want to land. And you could be the person that's helping them practice and prepare for it. So lots of different ways to volunteer with us. But if you go to swsol.org/volunteer, you can find all those opportunities and sign up for us.
You can also find more opportunities as well on sharedetroit.org. Again, as Sean said, their website, swsol.org, or give them a call, 313-481-3102. Sean, thank you so much for being with us.
Tyler, thank you for the opportunity.
More information on Southwest Solutions and 342 and counting other charities and nonprofits across the Detroit area can be found on sharedetroit.org. That is going to do it for this week's editions of the Megacast. As always, keep up to date with us and our partnering stations and their original programming each and every day, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on civiccentertv.com/megacast, where you'll find our full episodes and each segment on demand as well. Big thank you to Dr. Michael Greiner from Oakland University, as well as Sean DeFore from Southwest Solutions for being with us today. And as always, a huge thank you to Jared Clark at the studio of My Michigan TV and our director at Master Control right here at Civic Center TV in West Bloomfield today, Calvin Brown. Thank you very much for joining us this week. Until next time, take care of each other, and we'll see you very soon.